Hey guys, tonight we set sail not from a harbor, but from sleep itself. Imagine this. You're standing on a beach made of coral sand, still warm from the sun. It's the kind of warm that sticks to your toes even after nightfall. You're barefoot, clutching a carved paddle, and ahead of you stretches nothing but black water, humming under a sky filled with too many stars to name. There's no lighthouse, no glowing compass, no GPS whispering in your ear. Just the sound of wind teasing the palms in a canoe carved from breadfruit wood, waiting for you like a stubborn pet. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I was curious who else is up at this hour. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The canoe rocks gently beneath your feet as you step in. Surprisingly stable, and outrigger balances it like a counterweight. You sit low, knees near your chest, and behind you, an elder, maybe your grandfather. Maybe someone who smells like driftwood and smokes seaweed cigars gives the signal. No words, just a grunt and a point at the stars. And off you go. The paddle dips silently, rhythmically. You don't know where you're going. And you certainly don't know how you're supposed to find land out there, but the elder seems unconcerned. You're told he once found an island with no name after sailing for 6 days straight by reading nothing but the sky. No sextant, no maps. Just a head full of constellations and a gut full of fish. Your own stomach, not so sure. It's full of salted taro and nerves. Above, the Milky Way is smeared across the sky like spilled coconut milk. You're told later, this is your highway. You laugh at first. Highways don't twinkle. But then he explains how that band of stars helps you line up your course. You memorize. The way it slants, the angle it cuts across the horizon. It's not just pretty, it's a bearing. It's like the North Star in other parts of the world. Except here you track multiple stars. And they don't just point north, they form paths. You quickly realize you're expected to pay attention to everything. The slap of water against the hull. The direction of the wind on your skin. Whether the stars feel higher or lower than an hour ago. Navigation, he tells you, is about remembering what changes. Wish you could write it all down. But no one writes. They chant. They sing directions into their bones. Because here, forgetting is deadly. A real historical fact. These navigators, known as wayfinders, could cross thousands of miles of open ocean without any instruments. Some voyages between tiny islands spanned over 2,000 miles. Western sailors didn't believe it at first, thought it was all exaggerated, till they watched a Polynesian master. Navigators sail from Hawaii to Tahiti and back with no compass or charts, and then came the stick charts at your next stop. On a different beach, someone shows you one. It's not a map in any Western sense. It's a fragile lattice of coconut sticks, bent and tied with palm fiber, holding small white shells. You think it looks like modern art, or a spider web on vacation.
Well, you're told it's a Rebel Liba navigational chart from the Marshall Islands.
The sticks represent currents and swell patterns. The shells stand in for islands, sure, but only sometimes. In some cases, the shells mark where waves bend or break, not land. It's less about what you see, and more about what the ocean tells you. You don't use it while sailing. You study it beforehand. Then you burn the image into your mind and destroy the chart. It was never meant to get wet. A fringe tidbit. Some stick charts included references to mythical islands, places no one could prove existed, but everyone swore they saw once. Like Ku, said to appear only when you paddle during an eclipse. Was it metaphor? Maybe, but metaphor is still useful when you're thousands of miles from help. Historians still argue whether every island on these charts was real, or whether some were symbolic used for teaching, not finding. The canoe slides forward into deeper water. There's no horizon anymore, just dark below and stars above. It's strange how quickly your sense of direction evaporates. But your teacher doesn't worry. Tilts his head like a cat and points at a barely there sparkle rising in the east. That's your next guide star, not one you've heard of. Western astronomy names it something in Latin, probably after a Roman hero. But here it's Te Tote, the fisherman. It's not just a star, it's a story, a family name. and a direction. Suddenly, the ocean doesn't seem so empty. It's a sky turned upside down. You start to see how it all fits together. The canoe beneath you is a floating compass. Its sides line up with rising and setting points of important stars. The paddle. Strokes aren't just movement, they're rhythm, a way to feel drift. Even the smell of the seaweed shifts subtly when you pass over shell. Sometimes you wonder if they're just pretending to see all this sif. It's some elaborate prank. But then, in the distance, a faint glimmer. It's an island. After only 3 days of paddling, no wrong turns. No second guesses. And just like that, the elder falls asleep mid-paddle, as if to say, this was never hard. The hardest part, believing it was real? You try to sleep too, but your mind won't let go of one thought. If all this works, what else have we forgotten? You wake up with your back sore from the canoe's curved ribs and your face damped from ocean mist. Morning hasn't arrived, but the sky is no longer black, just a dark blue rinse, paling at the edges. You sit up slowly, the way people do when they've had dreams too large for their heads, and stare out across the endless, featureless ocean. And yet somehow, the old navigator is already awake. Or maybe he never slept. He's squatting at the bow, fingers trailing in the water, humming something that sounds like it's meant for the stars, but comes from deep in his throat. It looks like he's listening. But to what? Then you realize the ocean isn't quiet, it whispers, and it rocks, and every rock is a direction. The swell passes under your canoe not once, but twice, from 2 different angles. What? You hadn't noticed it before. One wave moves long and slow, like a breath. The other's sharper, coming from a diagonal, barely noticeable. But the navigator notices. He closes his eyes like a person listening for their favorite line in a song they know too well. Then he nods to you. You feel that? He says. You lie, of course. You say yes, but you feel nothing. Just wet, he explains slowly, as if to a child, or as a beginner. The ocean is not a blank space. It's a road system. Each swell you feel, each little nudge or bounce under the canoe is a message. Swells are made by distant winds, sometimes from storms hundreds of miles away. And each island you pass sends its own reflected waves that bend, bounce, and change direction as they pass over underwater seam. Your canoe is floating on a crisscrossed web of vibrations, like a spider perched on a giant moving net. Mainstream fact: Polynesian navigators trained themselves to read multiple swell directions simultaneously. They would lie flat in their canoes at night, letting their bodies learn how the canoe moved. Tilting, yawing, rising, dipping, because every motion was a clue. A trained navigator could feel the signature of a specific island's reflected swell days before landfall. Quirky tidbit.
Ow.
Some of them trained children to lie blindfolded in canoes and identify swell directions by taste. That's right, not touch. Taste, swell foam on the tongue, was said to carry the flavor of its source saltier from deep ocean, muddier from reef runoff. Right? Whether or not it worked, you'll never know. You gave it a try, licked the paddle, tip hand nearly gagged. You're not cut out for this. The navigator chuckles, then he points east. To swells, he says. One from that storm near Tonga. One from that reef behind us. See how they meet? That line in the water? You squint? No, you admit. He shrugs. You will. The canoe shifts ever so slightly, and your body adjusts without thinking. You start to notice something tiny. The swell that passed under you half an hour ago is now repeating. The same motion again. It's like a dance step you forgot you knew. Your hips shift without meaning to, and suddenly, you feel it. He grins. You're not lost anymore, he says. But you didn't even realize you were. It's a strange feeling learning the ocean is full. Not with fish, not with whales, not even with islands, but with information. Everything is data. The water temperature tells you how deep you are. The smell of the air tells you how far from land. The color of the light under your canoe hints at the kind of sand that lies far below. This isn't the kind of navigation you learn in books. It's a kind of memorized intimacy with nature. Historians still argue whether this should be called science or art? Is it empirical navigation or spiritual? Did these navigators really map thousands of miles through raw technique? Or was some of it luck, myth, or exaggeration? Western academics didn't know what to make of it for centuries. But here, sitting in this canoe with a man who knows where every swell was born, it doesn't matter. It works. The clouds start to thicken on the horizon, blushing pink and gold with sunrise. And once again, your teacher leans forward, points ahead. There you see nothing. Then a ripple, a shimmer. Not land, just a slightly different patch of sea. But he insists, that's the edge of a lagoon. How can you know? He explains it's the way the birds fly. Frigate birds loop in wide circles. When they're hunting far out, but here they're darting, cutting in tight angles, then flying back the way they came. Home. Another fact. Birds are a navigator's best friend. Some species won't fly more than a day from land. If you see them early in the morning and again at sunset, heading in the same direction, you follow them. Even seabirds have favorite trees to return to. The canoe glides along. And you, for the first time, feel like you're going somewhere even if you don't know where. There's something deeply calming about it. Like knowing that no matter what happens, the stars and waves are talking, and someone's listening. You look around at the sea, at the sky, the soft bump of the canoe against the current. It no longer feels like open water. It feels like a neighborhood. A living, humming. It's an invisible network that was always there, you just hadn't tuned in. You lie back in the canoe and let it all soak in. It's the hiss of water, the creak of wood, the occasional chuckle of your ancient teacher, who's now chewing something that smells strongly of fermented banana. It's okay. You're not the first to be confused by it all, and you definitely won't be the last to fall. Sleep on watch. You wake again to the sound of a splash, not gentle, like a paddle, but deliberate. Something's being done. The old navigator is. Standing now, his knees locked for balance, dipping a long piece of wood over the side. It looks like part of a broken mast, but he holds it with such precision like it's a measuring tape stretched across the sea. You sit up groggily, rubbing your neck. He glances at you, nods, then taps the canoe's hull. Your compass, he says. Still working, you look down at the canoe. It's just a wooden boat, right? A frame of lashed planks sealed with tree sap, bobbing like any other. But he points to its shape, its build, the careful symmetry of the outriggers, and the way. The prow subtly curves to the left. This canoe was built to match the sky, he says. It wants to go home. You frown. It wants to go where? He explains, not everything in this world is neutral. Canoes aren't blank tools. They're designed with intention. The hull isn't just aerodynamic, it's astronomic. The builders knew the rising points of key stars on the horizon. The canoe's body aligns with them. The center line is your east-west axis. Little cues to line up your body, your gaze, and your journey. So when you lie down on your back, head toward the stern. Your eyes naturally meet the horizon, where Ki-Alayo, Konai, Kalua will rise the chief of the southern skies. Westerners know it as serious. Mainstream fact. Traditional Polynesian voyaging canoes were not symmetrical. They had a subtle orientation, lining structurally with important star paths. The design allowed navigators to track courses using the shape of the vessel itself, especially at night, when visual landmarks disappeared. They weren't just boats, or floating instruments. The navigator walks to the center beam and opens a small compartment beneath the lashings. You expect to see maps, maybe supplies. Instead, dried bananas, a carved bone pendant, handful of dark volcanic stones. You see this? He says, holding one up. This is the Big Island's breath. It keeps us pointed. You blink, how? He rolls the stone in his palm. Wait, balance. The canoe shifts slightly, always slightly. You watch which side lifts first with the swell. Add a little here, subtract there. It keeps the canoe. True. It sounds absurd, till you realize that even in this light breeze, the canoe isn't yawing or drifting like yesterday. It's tracking clean. Quirky tidbit. Some master navigators insisted that each canoe had its own personality, or even temper. A stubborn canoe might pull to the left during waning moons or become unpredictable during certain tides. Whether this was superstition or nuanced observation is still up for debate, but they treated each canoe like a living companion, not an object. You sit cross-legged now, watching the navigator trace lines in the canoe's deck with his finger. He points to places you've never noticed, small notches in the wood, a tiny shell embedded near the stern, and 3 short feathers tied to a ridge. To you, it looks decorative. To him, it's a compass rose. These, he says, line up. With the star houses, each rising star has its place on the horizon. Your job is to keep it in the same position to the canoe as when you started. You try to take it in. Mentally measuring the angle between the front beam and the stars, it doesn't help. Then he places your hand on the canoe's edge, right where the outrigger meets the main hole. Now when that star he points to, Altair touches this point at dawn. We're still on course. It clicks. You're not memorizing stars, you're memorizing angles. The canoe itself becomes a giant wooden protractor. Historians still argue whether Polynesian canoes were intended to be this mathematical or whether the interpretations came later. Some anthropologists think the oral traditions became more precise over time, like stories evolving into science. Others say the genius was always there, just ignored by outsiders who didn't believe primitive cultures could engineer without. Blueprints the Navigator doesn't care what historians think. He tells you to close your eyes. Now feel where the stars are, says you do. At first, nothing happens. Then slowly you begin to notice the lean of your weight, the way the canoe tips a breath more to starboard, the way your shoulder feels cooler on one side, even though the breeze hasn't changed. He tells you these little clues are how you correct course in fog, storm, or even starless nights. You don't see stars, says you remember where they were. Then you feel what changed. You open your eyes again, blinking at the horizon. Nothing looks different, but everything feels different. You're no longer a passenger, you're becoming a navigator. The sky begins to shift against stars dimming, that pre-dawn haze thickening. Birds call somewhere out over the water. The navigator sits down and finally lets out a long sigh. We're halfway, he says. You look around, there's still nothing but ocean. But you believe him. Your compass is not in your hand. It's in your canoe, in your memory, and surprisingly in your body. By the time the sun fully rises, you're roasting. There's no shade out here. No clouds, no canvas sail to hide under. Not even a lucky flying fish to slap you in the face. For variety, just you, a slowly warping horizon, and the constant creak of wood expanding in the heat. The water glows turquoise now, but it offers no relief. You can't just jump in, not out here where sharks might think you're a flailing sea turtle wrapped in sunscreen. You eye the navigator. He hasn't moved for hours. It just sits, calm, blinking slowly, as if solar-powered. He finally stirs, reaches into the canoe's side basket, and pulls out a bundle wrapped in woven pandanus leaf. When he unwraps it, you don't see a snack. You see sticks, no joke, a whole clutch of crooked twigs, maybe 20 of them, tied loosely with coconut fiber. At first you think it's firewood, or driftwood, he's sentimental about. But then he lays them out carefully on the deck, spacing them with precision. Like he's assembling IKEA furniture without the instructions. You lean in, he's building a map, not the kind you roll up or pin to a wall. This is a stick chart, a rebelib, or a matong. Depending on the design and it's unlike any map you've ever seen. A few straight sticks run horizontally, a few curve-like crescent moons. Then, at certain intersections, he ties tiny shells cowries, mostly. He squints, adjusts one shell's position slightly, and sits back. There, he says. That's where we are. You glance around. You see no land, no buoys, no helpful. You are here, arrow. He taps a stick. Swells from the east. Long. Curve from the northeast. This part here. He points to a small triangle. Is the crossing. Crossing of what? He looks at you like you've asked where the sun goes at night. The place where the main swells intersect, he says. Means we're halfway between two islands and we're still centered. Mainstream historical fact. Stick charts were sophisticated tools made and used by Marshallese navigators. Rather than depicting exact distances or fixed positions, they represented relationships between islands, wave patterns, and ocean currents. They weren't meant to be read like street maps, but understood like musical scores interpreted through memorization and motion. Most astonishingly, these navigational maps were used entirely from memory. A student would study a chart for months, then be tested without ever bringing it aboard. These weren't maps, they were mental scaffolds. Your navigator moves the stick slightly, shifting the arc so one shell rests farther from center. He nods again. That storm we passed 2 nights ago changed the swell. We're drifting. Quirky tidbit. Some stick charts included patterns for imaginary or spiritual currents lines representing not wave movement, but ancestral passageways. A kind of spiritual GPS, if you like. The ancestors, they believed, left pathways in the ocean, and the most gifted navigators could still feel them if they listened deeply enough. You ask if he can feel them? He snorts. They mostly feel like hunger now. Still he doesn't. Laugh. Not really. He pulls out another set of sticks, shorter, tied in a more circular pattern. This one, he says, is a matong. It doesn't show a whole region, but a conceptual space. A single island, and the way swells behave around it. Refraction patterns, bending, shadow zones. Places where water slaps hard. Places where it kisses the canoe. Historians still argue whether the matang was used for actual navigation, or just for teaching. Some scholars say it's symbolic, a training tool. Others argue it's an elite's version, something used only by master navigators who had already memorized hundreds of ocean behaviors. Not just learning where you are, you're learning how things move around you. It's not passive knowledge, it's dynamic. You're not drawing a map. You become one. You reach out, almost shyly, and touch one of the shells. Is this a real island? You ask. He tilts his head. He says, long ago, now it's gone. You blink, gone how? He shrugs. The sea took it. The sky did. Either way, we don't go there now. There's a long pause. You stare at the shell. It's smooth, white, ordinary, but suddenly it feels like a ghost. And then he adds, almost as an afterthought, still shows up in some charts, though we keep it, just in case it decides to come back. It gets you. An island that disappeared. But no one wanted to erase it from the map. The ocean may not have memory, but the people who ride it do. The canoe creaks again. A swell rises under you, long and even. You feel the angle change by maybe half a degree. The sticks shift ever so, slightly in their positions. You both feel it. Without a word, he starts tying the bundle back up, knotting the chart together like he's sealing a secret. Then, to your surprise, he tosses the whole thing into the ocean. You yelp, wait, why? Smiles, because the sea already knows. We don't need it anymore. You lean over the edge, watching the chart float for a moment, then slowly sink, twigs and shells spinning into nothing. Another wave rocks the canoe, and still, you're not lost, because now the chart is in you. The sun creeps higher. It's that late morning light, now hotter, flatter, somehow more judgmental. The kind of brightness that makes you squint even when your eyes are closed. There's no shade, no breeze, no pause in the endless shimmer of the horizon. You're pretty sure your eyebrows are sweating. But the navigator seems fine. He's chewing something again, humming a song with no beginning or end. You try to hum along, but he shoos you gently. Listen first, he says, so you do. You. Let your ears catch the rhythm of the paddle dipping in and out of the water, the slap of waves along the hull, and then something subtler, a distant screech, faint flutter. Wings, somewhere above. You glance up. There, cutting across the sky like arrows loosed from heaven, fly 3 long-tailed birds, graceful, fast. You don't know the species, but the navigator doesn't hesitate, Neo, he says. Turn. Following the sun home, you watch the birds. They fly in a line, then arc suddenly to the left. You track them with your eyes. The horizon in that direction seems different, thicker, heavier. You realize that's not sky, That's land. Not visible yet, not even a smudge, but you feel it in your chest. He nods again. Birds tell truth. Mainstream. Historical fact. Polynesian navigators use bird behavior extensively to determine proximity to land. Some species, like the white tern neo and the noddy, will only venture a certain distance from their nesting islands. If you spot them at certain times of day, especially early morning and late afternoon, you can infer the direction of their flight path leads to land. Navigators would sometimes release captured birds and watch which way they flew. You watch the birds fade into the distance and ask, what if they just don't come back? The navigator gives you a look that says, then we eat something else. As the birds vanish, your attention shifts downward, toward the clouds. Big, flat-bottomed puffs begin to form on the horizon. They don't drift like others. They seem anchored, oddly still. The navigator shields his eyes, squints, then points. There. What is it? Cumulus, he says. Resting above land. You blink. Clouds over land, but you can't even see the land yet, he explains. When islands warm the air above them, moisture rises and condenses. Cumulus clouds often form and hover above large land masses. To a trained eye, a dense cluster of these clouds could be an early signal of landfallers before the land is visible. It's a kind of vertical map, but clouds lie too. He waves a hand at a different patch, high, wispy ones moving fast. Those are useless, he mutters. Shoffs, you chuckle, but he's dead serious. You start to realize that the sky, like the sea, is full of codes. You just have to know which ones not to trust. Quirky tidbit. Some ancient navigators believed that island spirits could cloak land with false clouds to test a sailor's worth. Others told stories of laughing. Clouds that mimicked cumulus formations, luring crews into open ocean with false hope. These were warnings passed down not to frighten, but to remind you that nature has a sense of humor. And a pretty dry one at that. Historians still argue whether this reliance on clouds was truly reliable or more a backup plan. Some scholars think the cloud method only worked in tropical regions with consistent patterns. Others believe that Polynesian navigators developed specific, locally accurate cloud reading systems that varied from archipelago to archipelago. But right now, it's the navigator staring at those clouds like they're a street sign. And suddenly, he sits taller. He pulls out a small board no, bigger than a dinner plate hand, sets it in his lap. It's carved with star lines like spokes from a central point. You've seen it before briefly. Called it the Papakaitha seaboard. Places a tiny coral stone on one of the outer lines. Points toward the clouds. That's where we go. You don't argue. You paddle. Paddle for hours, following a path made not by water or wind, but by birds and cloud shadows. And as the sun starts to lean westward, your eyes catch something strange movement in the water. A different color, darker. You blink again. It's not water. It's reef. And beyond it, the faintest edge of land. Not large, not dramatic. Just a sliver of green and sand, like someone smudged a paintbrush across the horizon. The navigator grins. Not because you've reached land, but because you saw it. You recognized it, you figured it out. You smile too, giddy. You want to shout, but the moment is so quiet, so sacred, you whisper instead. We made it. He shrugs. Of course we did. You glance at him. So what now? He grins wider. Go somewhere harder, because that's the point. This was never about arrival. It was about learning how to find the next. Unknown place before it finds you. The island is behind you now. It barely had time to register as real a few trees. Shallow lagoon, some fish. Grilled over driftwood before the navigator decided you'd rested enough. Less than a day ashore, and already the canoe is gliding back out into open water. Leaving coconut palms behind like a dream you forgot too quickly. You're sore. You're sunburnt in places you didn't know could burn. But you climb aboard without protest. Because this time, you want to see what happens next. As the island fades, so does the wind. The sea flattens. The paddle's splash seems louder now, isolated, echoing through a sky of wet silence. Then, somewhere high above, A bird calls. You look up, nothing, just blue on blue. But the navigator nods. It's time. Time for what? He opens a palm and shows you two long feathers, one red, one white. They're bound at the base with fine cord, frayed from years of salt and sweat. He tosses them into the air. They flutter, hover, then drift soft. They toward the west. That way you blink. That's the direction? He nods, adjusting. The steering paddle? But what if there's no sky? No stars tonight? Doesn't answer. He just hums. Because this, you learn, is the hardest lesson of all. How to navigate without the stars. Mainstream historical fact. Polynesian wayfinding wasn't just about following stars, it was about knowing what to do when you couldn't. Cloudy nights, storms, or daytime crossings meant navigators had to rely on non-visual cues. Ocean swells, sun position, bird behavior, and even memory of the prior night's celestial geometry. The canoe glides forward. It's no longer guided by the glitter of constellations, but by what lingers in your mind's eye. You shut your eyes and picture last night's sky, the way that line of stars. Pleiades angled upward just as you drifted off. You remember how Canopus skimmed the waterline and how the canoe tilted slightly toward it. You hold that memory, like a compass. You open your eyes again. The stars are gone now, veiled by a thick layer of clouds rolling in from the southeast. The light dims. Sunset, just a gray ceiling pressing down. You shift in the canoe. It's moving differently. Now, the rhythm you'd come to trust steady, predictably subtly off, like the boat itself is hesitating. The navigator stands and walks the length of the hull. Then he lies down completely flat and closes his eyes. You think he's napping, but then you see it. The slight twitch in his fingers as he traces the seams between boards, the barely there adjustments of his shoulders and hips. He's listening to the canoe, to the ocean beneath it. You lie down too. At first, it's just discomfort. Salt-dried skin sticking to warm wood. But after a minute, you begin to feel it too. A long rolling swell from behind, and a smaller cross-swell tapping the right side. The boat reacts to both, but not equally. The larger swell nudges it forward. The smaller one rocks it diagonally, and your body, without thinking, memorizes the pattern. Quirky tidbit. Some master navigators claim that, after decades of practice, their skin knew the oceans feel like you'd recognize a friend's footsteps in the dark. One navigator even joked that he could tell you the name of a reef based on how his kneecaps vibrated in a storm. You lie there for hours. No stars, no birds, just motion. You drift into a light sleep, the kind where you're still aware of rocking, of shifting pressure beneath your spine. In that half-dream, you feel your mind sinking with the canoe. Every push of water, every angle of sway, becomes part of your internal map. When you wake, the navigator is sitting cross-legged at the bow, chewing on dried mango and staring into the thick gray wall of sky. We're still on course, he says without looking. You blink. How do you know? He shrugs. Because we're not off. Historians still argue whether Polynesian navigators had something approaching a sixth sense, or whether this was simply generations of pattern recognition passed through oral tradition. The idea that a human being can mentally track speed, direction, and time over days of open water with no visual reference feels impossible. And yet, it kept happening. You chew a piece of your own dried mango leathery sweet and scan the sky. Still no stars. Still no sun. You ask him how long the clouds will last. He just says until they don't. You smile. To understand him now, the sea shifts again, a new swell from the north curling under the canoe like a slow exhale. The navigator raises a finger not to the sky, but to the boat itself. There it is. There what is. Correction. The swell pushes harder on the left outrigger. The canoe tilts, ever so slightly, adjusting its nose. You'll realize that the entire vessel is constantly correcting itself, responding not just to water, but to memory. Your last known angle, your last known drift, your last known you. You're not just riding the ocean anymore. You're working with it. It's a dance. But it's also an argument. And tonight the ocean's the one talking. You lie back. Again, staring up at a sky that hides its stars. You don't mind. Because even though you can't see them, you remember where they were. And that's enough. The sky clears just before dawn. Not all at once. Starts with a small tear in the clouds, just a crack of black giving way too deep, velvet blue. Then, like curtains being slowly pulled apart, the heavens reappear. First, a few stars faint, trembling, but then dozens, then hundreds. You sit up too quickly and bonk your knee on the outrigger. Worth it, you mutter, because there they are, your old friends. The navigator nods from the bow without turning. You remembered them? You nod back. You did. Sort of, he doesn't need you to say which stars or where you last saw them. He's testing you but gently, like a parent letting a toddler carry a cup of water. He wants to see if you'll spill it. You start whispering them to yourself. Dad. Bright one near the horizon Altair. Above it, the crooked line of Orion's belt. And just rising now, the unmistakable cluster of the Pleiades. Tiny, buzzing with ancient gossip, mainstream historical fact, Polynesian navigators organized stars into houses that rose and set at specific angles along the horizon. These houses, some 32 or more, acted like directional anchors. Stars' rising and setting point was a reference to a direction, a bearing. By watching a star emerge at a specific location on the horizon, a navigator could stay aligned with a chosen course for hours. The trick was knowing not just the names, but the sequence, which stars came before the others, which passed overhead at which time of year, and what it meant when they didn't. You ask the navigator how many stars he can name. We chews on a bit of dried breadfruit, then says, I don't name them. Know them, and that's the difference. You're used to maps where every dot has a name. Here, the stars aren't named as much as they are related to each other. You don't memorize Sirius. You memorize that Sirius rises when the second set of moonfish migrate, and that it climbs diagonally toward the breadfruit line after. Vegas sets. You memorize relationships. He asks you a question now. If you were blind, no sky, no clouds, no birds, how would you know where you were? You pause, then you realize you wouldn't need to know where you are. You'd only need to know how to feel what changed. He grins. You're getting it. He tells you about gut-feeling navigation now, in poetic terms, but in actual practice. On some journeys, when visibility is lost and swell patterns are confused by conflicting wind systems, the navigator must trust, not instruments, not even the canoe, but the inner sense of motion and timing. Quirky tidbit in some traditions. Navigators would fast before long journeys, not for spiritual reasons, but to heighten sensitivity to bodily motion. An empty stomach, they believed, made it easier to feel subtle changes in the canoe's angle or vibration. You, of course, are not fasting. You've been hoarding dried mango like a squirrel. Suddenly your stomach does feel a little too full to listen. You ask if this gut navigation is something they teach. He shakes his head. We don't teach it. It teaches you. You think about the days now, how many it's been since you last saw a shoreline. You've lost count. Not out of fear, but comfort. Time doesn't stretch here. Folds, loops, ripples like the water, and that's the other strange thing you're starting to realize. You're not navigating just through space. You're navigating through time. Each hour shifts the sky. Each night brings a new arrangement. The stars don't repeat in quite the same way. What you see tonight, you won't see tomorrow, at least not in the same place. Historians still argue whether Polynesian wayfinding systems had a concept of longitudinal tracking based on time, or whether they simply felt the passage of ours through embodied memory. Some modern experiments have tried to simulate this with digital models, but none quite match what happens when a human body is surrounded by nothing but water. Wood and wind for days. You feel your breath slowing. Something's shifted again. The canoe starts to rock differently, more steadily now. The stars reflect crisply on the surface, unbroken by wind. You glance down and see two skies, one above, one below. You blink. For a second, you're not sure which way is up. The navigator sees you wobble and smirks. Don't fall into the wrong sky. You laugh. But your knees agree it's best to sit down. You rest your hand on the side of the canoe and feel it, the gentle thud of a familiar swell. The one from the west, the one that's been with you since that first island. It's returned stronger. Clearer, you close your eyes and feel it push against your ribs. You nod. The west current's back, he nods too. And that means you don't even hesitate. We're nearing another chain, he smiles. You open your eyes again. The stars have shifted once more. Pleiades now sits higher and Orion is fading. The sky is changing. You're moving forward. Not blindly, not aimlessly, but knowingly. You're beginning to carry not just the map, but the method. You smile to yourself. Not because you've arrived anywhere, but because you finally believe you will. The wind picks up. Not all at once. Like a slap in the face, but gradually. Like the kind of warning you only notice when you're already in the middle of it. First, your hair flutters. Then your paddle fights you. Then the sail, silent since the last island, begins to tremble against its bindings, like it wants to speak. The navigator looks up, then loosens the rigging. The sail rises not modern fabric, but woven pandanus matting, light and strong, shaped like a bird's wing about to glide. It catches the breeze and pulls the canoe forward like a breath catching in a lung. You feel it in your chest before you see it. The acceleration. The canoe surges, lifting its prow like it's proud of something. Suddenly, you're no longer. Drifting, you're flying, and just in time too, because storm clouds are stacking on the horizon like bruises. Deep purple. Mean the kind of clouds that don't just promise rain. They promise to make you earn every mile. The navigator doesn't flinch, squints into the wind and adjusts the sail's angle using a series of clever lashings and counterweights. You offer to help? He grunts. You will. Mainstream historical fact. Polynesian canoes used crab claw sails, so named for their triangular shape. Wide at the base and tapering to a point. These sails could be adjusted not only side to side, but also front to back, letting navigators sail across or even slightly against the wind. Something Europeans didn't believe was possible until they watched it happen. You grip the main line and lean back as instructed. The wind tugs at your shoulders, trying to steal your balance. The canoe begins to tilt, just slightly, as the sail finds its sweet spot. It's like catching a wave that never ends. And then it happens, the wind shifts. Not dramatically, not like a storm, but enough to knock your angle off. The sail flaps, and the canoe yawns wide to port. You flinch, but the navigator's already countering paddle in. Rudder twisted, sail adjusted. You watch in awe as he wrestles the ocean like a man taming a lion with a feather and a song. Quirky tidbit. Some navigators claimed they could read wind shifts by the temperature of air across their cheeks. They'd stand in the canoe, eyes closed, and tell whether a gust was carrying island scent, open sea, or even bird-laden currents. One story tells of a navigator who refused to make landfall because the wind had too much fish in it. Turns out, a nearby reef had just been swarmed by migrating tuna. They landed an hour later, right in the middle of the feast. You can't smell fish. You mostly smell salt and your own fear. The clouds close in. Lightning crackles. Not close enough to worry yet, but close enough that you stop making jokes. The sea darkens, and the waves get taller, sharper. The swell's rhythm you'd grown used to is now fractured. Like a song skipping on a vinyl record, historians still argue whether Polynesian voyagers avoided storms or simply endured them. Some believe they had predictive knowledge based on cloud formations and pressure cues reading the ocean like a barometer. Others think they rode out bad weather by sheer luck and stubbornness, trusting their canoes and experience to carry them through. Your canoe, right now, feels like both a miracle and a death wish. But you notice something. It's holding steady, even as the wind slaps harder. Even as rain begins to pepper your face in short, stinging bursts. The canoe doesn't panic. Its curved hull rises with the waves instead of cutting through them. The lashings groan, but they don't snap. The sail flexes, but doesn't tear. This isn't just a boat, it's a creature. Alive, tough, ancient. The navigator shouts over the wind. Lean right. You throw your weight and feel the balance. Shift. The canoe flattens slightly, biting back at the gust. You've become a part of it now. A movable counterweight, not just a passenger. A participant. You scream not out of fear, but from something closer to joy, adrenaline, relief. You're still moving. The storm passes in under an hour. The sky opens up like a curtain yanked aside, revealing a strip of gold across the horizon, where the sun is trying to escape. The ocean calms, reluctantly. The sail slackens. You collapse backward, arms splayed alive, and more importantly, oriented. You didn't lose your course, not because of GPS, not because of compass, but because the canoe knew how to fight, and you knew how to listen. The navigator chuckles and hands. You a coconut already cracked open? You drink it like it's the last thing on earth? It tastes like victory and very old rope. You ask him if storms always come like that. He shrugs. Some are worse. You nod, thinking you'll sleep for a week, but he adds, and some are smarter. You sit up smarter? He doesn't explain. You figure he means the ones that sneak up on you. It's the ones that come at night. It's the ones that bring no rain or thunder, just confusion. It's dead wind, shifting swells. Hidden drift. Those are the ones you won't feel in your chest, only in your memory. You look at the stars fewer now. It's washed out by the sun's approach. You track the faintest trace of Pleiades sinking into the ocean's edge. We're still. Heading right, you ask? He nods, sipping his own coconut. We never stopped, and somehow you believe it, because if the canoe didn't turn, then neither did you. Your hands are wrecked, not in the dramatic movie way, no bleeding blisters or split nails, but in the quiet, aching kind of way that makes you understand why ancient sailors never needed gym memberships. The paddle feels heavier now, not because it changed, because you did. You haven't spoken in a while. Neither has the navigator. There's a rhythm now, silent but understood. You take turns paddling, trimming the sail, watching the sky, and more like breathing. If he moves, you adjust. If you blink, he doesn't. If he sighs, you know it's time to check the waves behind you. You're not following instructions anymore. You're following instinct. The sky is overcast today, a hazy shell of soft gray. No stars, no clear sun. Can't even say if it's morning or midday. The world has been painted in pastels. And yet he says you're still on course? You raise an eyebrow. You sure? He shrugs. Sure enough, you don't press. Because this is the part of navigation no one writes down. The in-between. Mainstream historical fact. Polynesian navigators divided their voyages into mental legs or segments. Some of these were based on physical cues, like a star setting, a bird spotted, or a change in current. Others were purely mental time-based guesstimates, calculated by how long it had been since the last known marker. These mental intervals were memorized, sung, repeated like prayers. You're in one now, a middle leg. No signs, no stars, no birds. Just the faith that enough good decisions earlier will keep paying off now. The ocean has gone flat, silent, like it's holding its breath. The navigator leans over and dips a hand into the water. Then he scoops something up, a handful of jellyfish. Tiny ones, barely visible. He smiles. Driftline, he says. Current still west. You blink? That's your cue. He nods. They write it like we do. Quirky tidbit. Some ancient wayfinders read the sea's surface for clusters of jellyfish, foam patterns, or even watercolor gradients to determine drift direction. Even plankton density, noticed by changes in the water's glow at night, could hint at proximity to certain currents or islands. Some even memorized the taste of water. In certain regions, you lean over and dip a finger in. It tastes like salt. Unsurprisingly, you mention this. He smirks. You haven't tasted this ocean enough yet. The wind shifts again, this time barely noticeable, a half-degree turn in the breeze. He adjusts the sail a finger width. You ask. Why, he doesn't answer. Instead, he tells you a story. Once, long ago, an apprentice navigator steered a canoe one-star house too far west. Only by one house, just a few degrees. Corrected the next night. Then again, he arrived safely. But he didn't realize. He pauses. At every correction, added more miles. He thought he'd made it fast. In truth, he added 3 days to the journey. You nod slowly. Even small misreadings, compounded over distance, become big mistakes. Historians still argue whether Polynesian navigators relied more on corrective course changes or precise directional memory. Some say it was all about constant adjustment micro-corrections based on wave, feel, and sun angles. Others argue that star path memorization allowed long, unbroken runs on stable courses without change here, floating through an endless watercolor. Of sea and sky, the answer seems obvious. Both. You need the precision of the stars, and the intuition to know when they've lied. A sharp clicking interrupts your thoughts. You glance over. The navigator's tossing small stones into a calabash bowl and muttering under his breath. You ask what he's doing, he says, checking our heartbeat. Apparently he counts the rise and fall of swells against time, using the sound of the stones as a metronome. The rhythm matches the expected pace. You're aligned with the known swell system. If not, you've drifted. You laugh. Like an ocean Fitbit. He doesn't laugh. You also notice him lightly tapping the canoe's hull with his knuckles, then pausing, then tapping again. You copy him, curious. The hull sounds different depending where you hit. He nods.
As.
Listen to the wood. It tells you where the water is shallow. It seems impossible. Until it isn't. Because a few hours later, you hear the first real change. The slap of a fish breaking the surface. Then another, and another. You see flashes of silver just beneath the water, and with it movement overhead. Birds, real ones this time, swooping low, darting, fishing. You, Pointy smiles. We're near reef. You sit taller. You scan the waiter, still no land, but it's coming. You can feel it in the water, and more importantly, you can feel it in yourself. You smell land before you see it. It hits you softly at first, like someone just peeled a mango on the wind. A sweet, leafy kind of smell, lush, like soil after rain, even though it hasn't rained in days. You sniff again. There it is. You glance at the navigator. He's smiling faintly. Not at you, not at anything in particular. Just smiling like a man who's been waiting for the moment your nose catches up to what his skin already knows. Land, wind, he murmurs. The sail flutters a little. You hadn't noticed the change until now? Subtle. The way the air brushes your right cheek instead of your left. But that shift is everything. Mainstream historical fact. Polynesian navigators could often smell land. Up to 30 to 40 kilometers away, depending on weather and vegetation. Different islands had distinct wind signatures, a mix of humidity, pollen, birds, and even types of trees. Coconut groves smelled different from breadfruit clusters. A volcanic island, smokier. Limestone atolls, dustier. You keep sniffing. It's strange to be this excited by a scent that vaguely resembles overripe bananas and damp leaves. But it means something. You're close. Then you see them clouds again. But not just any clouds, they're hovering. You've learned enough by now to know what that means. Island beneath, big enough to shape the weather above it. They rest in. Place like lazy guard dogs, you say. The navigator doesn't even glance up. Already knew.
Nice.
You roll your eyes, but it's playful now. The water changes next. It's almost imperceptible. A shift in color, more green than blue. Shallower. More alive. You peer over the side and see scattered flashistini reef fish darting just beneath the surface. And then, the sea texture thickens. Not literally. But the canoe doesn't bounce as easily now. It glides like it's passing through layers of silk. Quirky tidbit. Experienced voyagers could feel reef proximity based on how the sea sounded beneath the canoe. Even without sight or smell, the way waves interacted with reef structures below created a unique underwater resonance, something like a muffled echo, soft thunder under your feet. You kneel and press your palm flat against the hull. A low vibration hums through it. Your heartbeat syncs with it. Slow, steady. You're almost there. Still, no land in sight. The navigator begins to chant, not loudly, not dramatically. It's half sung, half muttered, more like talking to an old friend who hasn't answered in a while. His voice wavers with the wind, rising and falling like the stars once did. You catch only fragments, the coral teeth of the island, the breath of the ancestors rising, the place where birds return, but waves retreat. You don't ask what it means. You don't want to. You just listen. Because it doesn't feel like a chant to find. Something it feels like a chant to remember it. Historians still argue whether Polynesian chants were mnemonic aids for navigation or spiritual practices layered on to practical skill. Some say they encoded distances, directions, and landmarks into rhythm and rhyme. Others suggest they were ways of calling on ancestral presence, belief, that those who navigated before you could help guide your canoe if you remembered their names. You look at your navigator, not young, it's not old, somewhere between the age of stars and storm warnings. He's not steering with rope or paddle anymore. He's steering with memory. And you start humming along. Not the words, just the shape of them. And then finally you see it. A smear of green on the horizon. Faint at first, like a painting that forgot to finish itself. Then clearer. Trees, a line of pale sand, sharp rock formations, arise in the center land. Not just any land. You nearly fall over, scrambling to stand, pointing and yelling. There it is. The navigator squints as if trying to see if you're sure. You practically dance. He lets you. Then he says, "Not yet." You freeze? What do you mean, not yet? He gestures to the sea. You can't just charge in. Island reef will slice you open. You wait for the turn.
He's right.
As you drift closer, the waves break hard against something invisible. Reef shelf just below the surface. The water crashes over it like white lace. Beautiful, deadly. There's a small gap, maybe 30 meters wide, where the waves don't break. The pass, the navigator waits. The canoe bobs like it's holding its breath again. Then, just as the sun climbs above the clouds behind you, he gives the nod. You paddle hard. Steering toward the opening, the waves grow louder, louder, then suddenly silent. The canoe slips through the gap, the lagoon inside. It's like glass, shallow. Still, shimmering with green light, you coast the last few meters, gliding toward shore as fish scattered beneath you in silver bursts, then dash thunk. Sand. You've arrived. You don't cheer. You just sit there, soaking it in. The navigator steps out, walks 3 paces into the shallows and turns. Come, he says. Land is not just a place. It's a reward. You step into the water, warm, clear. Soft sand beneath your feet. It feels like walking into a memory you didn't know was yours. The island greets you with silence. Not the eerie kind, but a rich, full quiet. One that hums in the background. Like everything here has paused just to acknowledge your arrival. No engines. No footsteps. No voices except the rustling of trees, the lapping of tide, and the distant cackle of some bird you can't identify. You step fully onto shore, the sand warm and surprisingly fine, not coarse or sharp like you expected. It sifts around your ankles, hugging each step like it's trying to remember your feet. The navigator doesn't look back. He's already collecting palm fronds, checking for coconuts, scanning the tree line. Like a man who's done this on 100 islands before. You feel like an astronaut stepping onto an alien planet, and he's just checking the minibar. You ask if he knows this island. He says no, then adds, but the island will know us soon. Mainstream historical fact. Many Polynesian voyages were one way. Some were exploratory, seeking new lands to settle permanently. When land was found, new voyaging communities would form sometimes, remaining in contact with the original home island via return journeys, and sometimes not. The idea wasn't always to go back. It was to find the next place. You help gather what he points to. Breadfruit leaves for bedding. Smooth stones, too. Ring a fire. You don't ask what he's planning next. You're learning not to. There's a rhythm to even this partland fall. The way he tests the trees, sniffing leaves, rubbing bark. The way he walks the beach in sweeping lines, occasionally crouching, to examine something small, a crab shell, a feather, a footprint that turns out to be his own from 5 minutes ago. You ask if he's looking for people. He shakes his head. If there are people, they already know we're here. That's comforting, quirky tidbit. In old voyaging traditions, some islands were considered gifted and others moody. Gifted islands were lush, cooperative, filled with friendly birds, plentiful roots, and easy water. Moody islands might hide their springs, repel canoes with stormy reefs, or play tricks with dangerous fruits. Navigators treated land itself like it had personality. It was important to earn its favor. You try not to take offense when a coconut narrowly misses your head falling from a tree. The navigator smirks. Island likes you. Make camp. Under a sloping breadfruit tree, the shade is perfect. The bugs are few. That's not paradise. Exactly, but it's close enough to fool you for a while. You eat quietly. The fish is roasted over hot stones, seasoned with sea salt and some mystery. Leaf, the navigator, assures you is mostly safe. You chew slowly. Your stomach agrees. Your spine stretches against the trunk. Your breath finally stops trying to race itself. You ask the question that's been hiding under your tongue for days. So how do you know when it's time to leave? He chews, swallows, looks out over the water when the island gives you what you came for. And if it doesn't, then you learn what it won't give. Historians still argue whether these early navigators were simply explorers or intentional settlers. Some believe every voyage was a high-stakes gamble for new territory. Others suggest they were guided by ritual, prophecy, or even dreams voyaging, not just toward opportunity, but destiny. You lean your head back and stare through the breadfruit leaves. The sun filters in, soft and green. It smells like salt and moss and ash and citrus. You close your eyes, and in that half-sleep, you start to remember not just this island, but every place you've seen since stepping into that canoe. The first wind, the first bird, the jellyfish, the storm, the stars, they feel like pages in a story, but not one that someone told you, one you lived. You dream briefly something about paddling through the stars themselves. The canoe lifting into the sky, sailing across Orion's belt like a cosmic wave. The navigator beside you, laughing. You wake with a jolt. He's sitting by the fire, sharpening a stick. He glances over. You ready? You ask. Ready for what? He nods toward the canoe resting at the water's edge, half covered in drying seaweed and scattered driftwood. Next journey. Your heart sinks and rises at the same time. You just got here, but you understand. This was never a destination. This was a leg. The navigator stands, stretches, offers you a hand. And the funny thing is, because you've stopped looking for the end, now you just want to see what's next. You leave the island behind in silence. No farewell ceremony. No fireworks, no sad music swelling in the background. Just the soft scrape of the canoe's hull sliding off sand, a gentle splash of paddles dipping into clear shallows, and the steady retreat of palm trees disappearing behind you like they never quite believed you'd made it ashore in the first place. The wind is light, but steady, coming from the southeast now. The sail fills again. You're gliding forward. You don't ask where you're going. Not anymore. The navigator hasn't said a word since you pushed off. Doesn't need to, because the stars are already telling you a story. They rise like old friends, each in the order you now expect. Pleiades low and bright, Orion's belt angling toward the left outrigger. You find Altair before he even looks up. He glances your way, eyebrows slightly raised. You just smile and nod. He grunts. Approval, probably. You're doing it. Reading the sky yourself? Mainstream historical fact. Many traditional Polynesian navigators used what's called a sidereal compass, built entirely on the rising and setting points of specific stars. This compass wasn't physical, it lived in the mind. By memorizing which stars rose at which points on the horizon, keeping track of their movement throughout the night, a navigator could stay on course for weeks. You whisper to yourself, Now Altair rising at Northwest House 3, Canopus tailing south by 1 finger width. Vega has not yet climbed. You don't need to say it, but it helps you believe it. The sea is calmer than before. No storm in sight. It's just a wide moonlit plain stretching infinitely in all directions. You lie on your back in the canoe, letting your fingers drag lightly in the water. It's warm tonight. It's a kind of warm that makes you feel like you're floating in something older than time. Then the navigator sits up. He points not to the sky this time, but to the reflection. There, on the water's surface, the stars shimmer back at you in perfect mirror form, but one of them is shaking. You squint on a star. A disturbance. Ripples. Movement. You sit up fast. A shape breaches. Just for a moment, sleek, graceful, gone again, then another, and another. A pod of dolphins is moving alongside the canoe, weaving between hull and outrigger like they've done this before. Like they've waited for you. The navigator doesn't even smile, just nods and says, "Right on time." You blink. They're part of the route? He shrugs. Sometimes they help. Quirky tidbit. Ancient wayfinders believed dolphins, sharks, and even whales could act as guides for canoes. Some navigators told stories of pods that traveled beside them for days, nudging the canoe when it drifted off course, warning them of reefs ahead or simply offering company. Others said dolphins were the spirits of past navigators returning to walk beside their descendants. One dolphin surfaces and lets out a wet, wheezy snort right next to you. It stares for a half second, then dives. You could swear it winked. Paddle quietly now. You don't want to disturb the rhythm. And then something changes. The water feels heavier, not rougher. Just thicker. As if something vast and slow is moving beneath you. You look over the side, and suddenly you understand why the stars are so still. You've entered a current, a massive one. The canoe rides it without resistance. You barely paddle. The sail, barely, flutters. You are being carried. The navigator gestures to the stars, then to the horizon. We ride this until Orion tips over. God. You know what that means now? It'll take hours. Maybe most of the night. But you understand the rhythm. Orion begins upright, then leans, then drops below the horizon, one star at a time. When the third belt star disappears, you adjust the heading. Historians still argue whether early Polynesian. Wayfinders mapped open ocean currents with the same clarity they did stars. Some claim they memorized the seasonal shifts and flow across vast areas, anticipating when to enter or avoid certain bands. Others believe it was more improvisational, learned through experience and shared. Orally, but not plotted with precision. You lie back again and watch Orion slowly tip sideways. You can feel the pull now. The canoe isn't just coasting, it's sliding. Like some invisible hand beneath the waves is guiding it forward. And you realize something else. You're no longer afraid of the ocean. You're part of it. You don't need to name every fish, or trace every star, or decode every gust of wind. You just need to listen. The dolphins peel away just before dawn. No big goodbye. Just one last arc, a tail slap, and gone. The navigator says nothing. You think maybe? You don't need to either, because a new day is coming, and that means new stars. To follow, new mistakes to make, new corrections to remember. You're not arriving anywhere, just yet, but you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Dawn arrives, like someone gently turning up the brightness on the world. The stars don't vanish, all at once. They fade slowly, reluctantly, like they don't want to leave you just yet. Orion is the last to go, his belt slipping beneath. It's the western horizon as the sky blushes lavender and pink. You stretch in the canoe, joints cracking like old wood. The navigator stands already, brushing salt from his shoulders and scanning the sea with narrowed eyes. You don't need to ask what he's looking for, signs, because even with daylight now brightening the horizon, you realize this is the most dangerous time of all. With no stars, no clear land in sight, and the wind shifting again, this is the in-between space where mistakes are easiest to make. Mainstream historical fact: Polynesian navigators, relied on many subtle signs in the daylight bird flight paths, cloud shadows, ocean color gradients, and even the direction of flying fish or drifting seaweed. One or two signs meant little, but when multiple signs aligned, they could be used to confirm position or approach land. The water glistens in silver sheets now, with fine ripples dancing over the surface. A group of birds arcs high above frigate birds, with their long angular wings. They're flying west. You point. He nods. Morning feeding. If they return by midday, we follow. Now you wait. The sail comes down. The paddles rest beside you. The canoe simply drifts, cradled by the slow roll of the swell. You're not in a hurry, you're observing. At first it's just sky and water, but then the details come alive. A sudden shift in wave texture, like the ocean changed its mind mid-breath. The glint of a jellyfish cluster. The distant sound of birds squabbling. The navigator hums softly some old chant, tuneless and rhythmic. You watch him, trying to sense what he senses. Quirky tidbit. Some navigators reportedly learn to taste the difference between waters. Not just fresh and salt, but slightly warmer or colder layers or currents carrying different mineral traces. One elder even claimed he could tell how far he was from a volcanic island by how earthy the sea tasted that day. You try sipping a handful. It tastes like salt water and regret. Suddenly he points. A low cloud, small, round. Suspiciously, motionless, you squint. There. He nods. Is it a cloud? He grins. Not for long. You stare harder. It sits differently than the other cloud squatter, with a faint yellow blush at its base. It's not moving, even as wind carries its neighbors east. You realize what it is. Land cloud, the type that forms above warm, vegetated islands, especially in the early morning, when the land radiates moisture upward, creating a kind of invisible flag. It means there's something solid below. You feel a thrill, even though you haven't seen actual ground yet. But then, another one appears. Then a third. 3 clouds. 3 potential islands. The navigator strokes his chin and adjusts the canoe. Slightly north, you ask, which one? Doesn't answer. Instead, he says, watch the birds. You do the same group from before, and they're looping back. 3 of them break off and dive toward the first cloud. Another pair veers east, circling the second. But the largest group? They circle wide, then angle toward the third. He taps your shoulder and points. Historians still argue whether bird watching was more intuition or science. The technique, called avian navigation, relied on observing species-specific behavior. Frigate birds, for instance, can soar for days, but always return to land to roost. Noddies fly short distances and often give away reef proximity. But none of this is absolute, just patterns. Repeated, tested, remembered. You paddled not fast. Just steadily, the canoe responds with enthusiasm, like it's eager to confirm what your eyes and instincts are only just beginning to believe. The third cloud grows taller. The navigator leans over the side and taps the water again. Change. In salinity, he murmurs. You frown. He holds up a wet hand. It's cooler, slightly fresher. River mouth. You blink. You can feel that? He nods. Me feels it first, then me. And sure enough, the swell pattern begins to change again. The long, rolling rhythm breaks against something invisible. Soft undertow pulls slightly right. You adjust the paddle. Ahead, the cloud lifts a little in for a split second. You see it green. Not much. Just a sliver of treetop against a jagged cliff, and it vanishes into mist. But, you know land? You grin. We're almost there. The navigator doesn't react. Just keeps paddling. Calm. Measured. But his knuckles whiten around the shaft. He's excited. 2. You look up once more, and now you see birds returning to roost. You see clouds parting just a bit, and you see the water darken not from depth, from shadow, from the island waiting beneath the mist. The coastline reveals, self like an ancient secret. First a jagged silhouette, sharp against the lifting fog. Then crags and folds, dark rock glistening with salt mist. Trees come next dense and lush, dripping green down the cliffs like paint running down a canvas. You blink once, twice. It still feels like it might dissolve if you stare too long, but it doesn't. It grows. The navigator leans into his paddle now. No need for sails. The wind shifted again, now blowing off the land, resisting your arrival. You both paddle in steady silence, muscles burning, the canoe nosing forward like a dog picking up scent. You're not sneaking up on this island, you're earning your place on it. Mainstream historical fact, Polynesian landfalls were precise. Often timed for early morning or late afternoon when light on the water was softer, making reefs more visible. Navigators avoided approaching new islands under the harsh midday sun glare could hide rocks, reef passes, or even entire shorelines. Morning was best. Birds were active, clouds easier to read, and winds typically steadier. The sun has climbed. A bit now, but it's still low enough to cast golden stripes on the water. The sea itself has changed color, again now a deep turquoise, with glassy transparency revealing coral heads not far below. Too shallow. The navigator grunts, adjusting the rudder and aiming for a darker ribbon ahead a narrow pass between coral. Fingers, you ask? Another reef? He nods. Always. Because no island ever offers itself without some kind of gatekeeper. Quirky tidbit, there are stories of legend, of training manual of navigators who memorized every reef entrance. Not by sight, but by sound. The way waves broke against rocks, the frequency of the crash, even the echo it made in the lagoon. The ocean sings its secrets, one old navigator said, only if you stop shouting at it, you shut up. The canoe coasts forward then. Suddenly, the water flattens, like it's gone from a restless mood into reverent stillness. You know what that means now? The lagoon, another one, not the same as the last. This one is wider, shallower, even more brightly colored. Fish scatter beneath your hull like spilled gemstones. Sea turtle drifts lazily past, not even flinching at your approach. Then comes the scent, different than the last island. Sharper.spici, like crushed ginger and smoke and maybe cooked taro. You inhale deeply. Someone's here. The navigator nods. He doesn't look surprised, just adjusts the rigging slightly and coasts toward the northern edge of the lagoon. You follow his gaze. There a stretch of dark sand. Bird? With smooth boulders, nestled at the edge of the trees, half hidden, is a simple lean-to made from banana leaves and driftwood. A canoe rests nearby, not yours. You grip your paddle tighter. Are we intruding? The navigator shrugs. If they didn't want visitors, they'd hide better. You frown. Oh, that's reassuring. Gestures. Come. You step into the water, cooler here than before. You tread carefully, not out of fear, but respect. This isn't just landfall. This is someone else's land. The trees part easily. You hear birds scatter, leaves shifting overhead in the gentle thrum of insects tuning up for the day. The navigator walks without hesitation. You, less so, then a sound, a soft click, then another. You freeze footsteps. Two figures emerge from the trees. Both carry long poles fishing spears. Maybe, but neither raises them. They squint. You squint back. One of them speaks a word you don't know, soft but firm. The navigator answers with a few phrases, calm and steady. A pause, then laughter. Yours is the nervous kind. Theirs is not. One of the men steps forward, offers a hand. You take it. Warm, calloused, real, no fireworks, no grand welcome feast. But you've been acknowledged. That's enough. Historians still argue whether these first contact moments were scripted or spontaneous. In some cases, arriving canoes were met with suspicion, if an aggression if the visitors weren't known. But in others, shared language, roots, and cultural cues allowed near immediate rapport. Some accounts speak of quiet exchanges gifts, of shellfish or song before any words were shared. The navigator exchanges. Something now, small carved token from his belt for a bundle of folded leaves, tied with fiber. An offering. A recognition then, just like that. The two islanders disappear again back into the forest without explanation. You exhale. That went well. The navigator shrugs. They didn't throw stones. You smile. You turn to him. So do we stay? Sits, sips from his canteen, then says, "We observe." Not a yes. Not a no. You sit beside him, resting your back against the hull of the canoe. The sand beneath you is damp but warm. The lagoon sparkles ahead. The trees behind whisper ancient. Things you don't understand but no longer need to. Because this leg of the journey, it might last a while. The sun climbs higher. You lose track of time not in that lazy vacation way, but in the quiet, bone-deep way that happens when your body finally catches up with the rhythm of the world around it. No clocks, no schedules. Just light, wind, and instinct. The navigator hasn't spoken for a while. He's crouched by the canoe, tightening lashings, rubbing seaweed between his fingers. You sit nearby, carving a chunk of driftwood into something that probably won't look like anything, but it feels like a practice worth keeping. A breeze carries the smell of smoke, small, distant. Cooking fire, maybe, somewhere deeper in the forest. You both know you're not alone on this island. You just haven't been invited. It's further in yet, and neither of you minds. Because this is part of the dance. Mainstream historical fact. New arrivals to settled islands. It's often waited days, or even weeks before full interaction occurred. Time was needed to observe, assess, and prepare. Both visitors and hosts would watch from a respectful distance. It wasn't avoidance, it was etiquette. You think back to your first few days in the canoe, how eager you were to name everything, to ask 1,000 questions, to demand explanations. Now you understand the navigator's silence is better. They weren't cryptic, they were patient. You listen now, instead of filling space. The sea laps gently. Birds squabble above. Something rustles through the undergrowth. Not close enough to see, just enough to know, and you begin to feel something unexpected. Not pride. Not relief, but belonging. Like this journey, wild and strange and unthinkable at first, has somehow reshaped the architecture of your mind. You'll never look at the ocean the same way again, or clouds, or birds, or silence. Quirky tidbit. In some traditions, new navigators were given symbolic names after their first successful voyage, not necessarily based on success in arrival, but in observation. He who sees rain in the waves, she who follows the fins, one who listens to mist. These weren't titles. They were reminders. You wonder what yours would be. You're still turning that thought over when the navigator hands you something, a stick map. But not like the others. This one is smaller, simpler. Just a few main sticks bent into the soft curve of a swell, tied with coconut fiber. No shells, no labels, just the echo of a root. You blink, you made this. He nods once. For you, you run your fingers along the knots. It's not a map to a place. It's a map of an experience. A record of feeling your way across the unknown. You don't know what to say, which you're pretty sure is the point. Historians still argue whether stick maps were meant for teaching or remembering. Some claim they were tools used only on land, to explain routes to young navigators before a journey. Others believe they were sacred made after a voyage to mark what was learned rather than where one went. The truth is likely both. You lie back again, watching a single cloud drift overhead, shaped suspiciously like a fishhook. The wind shifts again. Almost Tishan. Singe. Singe tomorrow. He says, maybe we go again. You don't ask where, you just nod. Because now, you know there will always be another island, and the only real question is whether you're willing to paddle toward it. You close your eyes and just listen to the hush of water over reef, to the heartbeat of wood under sun, to your own breath, steady, even quieter than it's been in years. And as everything begins to slow, wind down 300 words, your breath deepens. The sounds around you soften, water whispering against sand, trees sighing gently in the breeze. Even the birds seem to settle, as if they, too, have listened to this journey and now know it's time to rest. You're safe now. No storms, no reef passes to navigate, no decisions to make. Just the hush of the lagoon and the steady rhythm of your heartbeat, slowing to match the ocean's calm. You imagine the stars rising again one by one, soft lights dotting the darkening sky above your canoe. You don't need to read them now. You've read enough. They're simply there, old friends, keeping watch. The navigator sits quietly beside you. You don't have to talk. He's not measuring wind tonight. He's resting too. The canoe rocks gently beneath you, as if cradled. In the arms of the sea, each movement is small, steady, certain like the pulse of something ancient. Something that's always been there, waiting to carry you forward. You let go of the need to understand. Everything you let go of the need to arrive. Because sometimes, the journey is the destination. So now, let your thoughts drift like the tide, let your eyes close if they haven't already, and feel yourself held by water. By memory, by the rhythm of 1,000 paddles before you. The island is here. The map is within you. And the sea will wait until morning. Sleep well, Voyager.